Hare Krishna, everyone. Welcome back to the live studios here in Govardhan, ISKCON Govardhan Ashram, right across the street from Govardhan Hill. And we've changed venues, as you may have noticed, the last couple of days. We've moved from Vaisheshika Prabhu's room to my room. But this is a 10 by 10. So here we are, cozy, with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 brahmacharis. I'm in good company. And we're going to read from Srimad-Bhagavatam tonight, as we do every night. It's a vow I took to do every night for the rest of my life. Welcome aboard, and welcome aboard all of you that are out there in cyberspace. And we just heard that we went over 1,000 followers, and I'm deeply, deeply touched and moved and motivated to continue this. And it's all because of you that I can continue this for the rest of my life without missing a day. Okay, let's hear the glorification of Srimad-Bhagavatam by Sanatana Goswami. It goes like this. Sarva Shastrabdipi Yusha Sarva Vedaika Satpala Sarva Siddhanta Ratnaja Sarvalokaika Drikprada. O nectar from the ocean of all scriptures, singular fruit of all the Vedas, rich mine of the precious gems of all conclusive truths, you are the only giver of sight to all the worlds. Sarva Bhagavata Prana Srimad Bhagavata Prabho Kalidvandotita Ditya Shri Krishna Parivartita. O life air of all the Supreme Lord's devotees, O Master Srimad-Bhagavatam, you are the sun risen in the darkness of Kali. You are the exact image of Sri Krishna. Paramananda Pataya Prema Varshakshadayate Sarvada Sarvasevyaya Shri Krishnaya Namostume. I bow down to you, who are supremely blissful to read. Your every syllable pours down a flood of prema. You can always be served by everyone. That's right, boys. You are Sri Krishna himself. Madeka Bando Matsangin Madguro Mad Mahadana Manistadaga Mad Bhagya Mad Ananda Namostute. My only friend, my constant companion, my spiritual master, my great wealth, my savior, my good fortune, my source of ecstasy, I bow down to you. Asadu sadutadayin atini chotatakada hanamunchagadachin mam premnarit kantayospura. O bestower of saintliness to the unsaintly, O exalter of the most fallen, please never leave me. Always appear in my heart and my voice with pure love. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Music to my ears. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Okay, here we are with Lord Brahma. In case you didn't notice, these personalities that are in the Bhagavatam are actually present in the sound. So here we are with Lord Brahma. He has entered the stage, and he is making his prayers to Krishna, who has just appeared before him after he performed his austerities and penances in love. This is called prayers by Lord Brahma for creative energy. And we're in the middle of the chapter. We're beginning on chapter 9 of Canto 3. We're starting with text 31. Oh, I'm sorry. This is, Brahma has finished his prayers, and now Krishna is responding to Brahma. So this is Vishnu himself, Garbhodakshaya Vishnu, speaking to Lord Brahma after Brahma made his prayers for creative energy. Text 31. O Brahma, when you are absorbed in devotional service, In the course of your creative activities, you will see me in you and throughout the universe. And you will see that you yourself, the universe, and the living entities are all in me. Purport. It is cited herein by the Lord that during his daytime, Brahma would see him as Lord Sri Krishna. He would appreciate how the Lord expanded himself into all the calves during his childhood at Vrindavan. He would know how Yashoda Mai saw all the universes and planetary systems within the mouth of Krishna during his playful childhood pastimes. And he would also see that there are many millions of Brahmas during the appearance of Lord Krishna in Brahma's daytime. But all these manifestations of the Lord, appearing elsewhere in his eternal transcendental forms, cannot be understood by anyone but the pure devotees, who are always engaged in devotional service to the Lord and are fully absorbed in the Lord. The high qualifications of Brahma are also indicated herein. Text 32. You will see me in all living entities as well as all over the universe, just as fire is situated in wood. Only in that state of transcendental vision will you be able to be free from all kinds of illusion. Purport. Brahma prayed that he might not forget his eternal relationship with the Lord during the course of his material activities. In answer to that prayer, the Lord said that he should not think of existing without a relationship with his omnipotency. The example is given of the fire in wood. The fire kindled in wood is always the same, although the wood may be of different types. Similarly, the bodies within the material creation may be specifically different according to shape and quality, but the spirit souls within them are not different from one another. The quality of fire, warmth, is the same everywhere, and the spiritual spark, or the part and parcel of the Supreme Spirit, is the same in every living being. Thus, the potency of the Lord is distributed all over his creation. This transcendental knowledge alone can save one from the contamination of material illusion. Since the Lord's potency is distributed everywhere, a pure devotee or devotee of the Lord can see everything in relationship with the Lord, and therefore he has no affection for the outer coverings. That pure spiritual conception makes him immune to all the contamination of material association. The pure devotee never forgets the touch of the Lord in all circumstances. Text 33. When you are free from the conception of gross and subtle bodies, and when your senses are free from all influences of the modes of material nature, you will realize your pure form in my association. At that time, you will be situated in pure consciousness. Purport. In the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, it is said that a person whose only desire is to render transcendental loving service to the Lord is a free person in any condition of material existence. That service attitude is the sarupa, or real form of the living entity. Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in the Chaitanya Charitamrita also confirms this statement by declaring that the real spiritual form of the living entity is eternal servitorship to the Supreme Lord. The Mayavad school shudders at the thought of a service attitude in the living entity, not knowing that in the transcendental world, the service of the Lord is based on transcendental love. Transcendental loving service is never to be compared to the forced service of the material world. In the material world, even if one is under the conception that he is no one's servant, he is still the servant of his senses, under the dictation of the material modes. Factually, no one is master here in the material world, and therefore the servants of the senses have a very bad experience of servitude. They shudder at the thought of service because they have no knowledge of the transcendental position. In transcendental loving service, the servitor is as free as the Lord. The Lord is Swarat, or fully independent, and the servant is also fully independent, or Swarat, in the spiritual atmosphere, because there is no forced service. There, the transcendental loving service is due to spontaneous love. A reflected glimpse of such service is experienced in the service of the mother unto the son, the friend's service unto the friend, or the wife's service unto the husband. These reflections of service by friends, parents, or wives are not forced, but are due only to love. Here in this material world, however, the loving service is only a reflection. The real service, or service in Sarup, is present in the transcendental world, in association with the Lord. The very same service in transcendental love can be practiced in devotion here. This verse is also applicable to the Jnani school. The enlightened Jnani, when free from all material contaminations, namely the gross and subtle bodies, together with the senses of the material modes of nature, is placed in the Supreme and is thus liberated from material bondage. The Jnanis and the devotees are actually in agreement up to the point of liberation from material contamination. But whereas the Jnanis remain pacified on the platform of simple understanding, the devotees develop further spiritual advancement in loving service. The devotees develop a spiritual individuality in their spontaneous loving service attitude, which is enhanced on and on up to the point of Madhurya Rasa, or transcendental loving service reciprocated between the lover and the beloved. I heard Gopi Puranadana Prabhu once make a statement. He's very deep, and sometimes he made these one-liners that just catch your mind and give you realization. He said, going back to the spiritual world is like merging into the eternal spiritual variety. Because the Mayavadis, when they think of merging and losing all individuality. There's no variety, there's no activity, there's no anything. So he would say, in order to bewilder their minds, he would say, spiritual realization is like merging into the eternal spiritual variety. Text 34. Since you have desired to increase the population innumerably, and expand your varieties of service, you shall never be deprived in this matter, because my causeless mercy upon you will always increase for all time. So now we know why Brahma gets out of his messes that he gets into. Purport. A pure devotee of the Lord, being cognizant of the facts of the particular time, object, and circumstances, always desires to expand the number of devotees of the Lord in various ways. Such expansions of transcendental service may appear to be material to the materialist, but factually they are expansions of the causeless mercy of the Lord towards the devotee. Plans for such activities may appear to be material activities, but they are different in potency, being engaged in the satisfaction of the transcendental senses of the Supreme. Text 35. You are the original Rishi, and because your mind is always fixed on me, even though you will be engaged in generating various progeny, the vicious mode of passion will never encroach upon you. Purport. The same assurance is given to Brahma in the second canto, chapter 9, verse 36. Being so favored by the Lord, Brahma's schemes and plans are all infallible. If sometimes Brahma is seen to be bewildered, as in the 10th canto, he is bewildered by seeing the action of the internal potency. That is also for his further advancement in transcendental service. Arjuna is found to be similarly bewildered. All such bewilderment of the pure devotees of the Lord is specifically meant for for their further advancement in knowledge of the Lord. Text 36. Although I am not easily knowable by the conditioned soul, you have known me today because you know that my personality is not constituted of anything material, and specifically not of the 5 gross and 3 subtle elements. Purport. Knowledge of the Supreme Absolute Truth does not necessitate negation of the material manifestation, but understanding of spiritual existence as it is. To think that because material existence is realized in forms, therefore spiritual existence must be formless, is only a negative material conception of spirit. The real spiritual conception is that spiritual form is not material form. Brahma appreciated the eternal form of the Lord in that way, and the personality of Godhead approved of Brahma's spiritual conception. In Bhagavad Gita, the Lord condemned the material conception of Krishna's body, which arises because he is apparently present like a man. The Lord may appear in any of his many, many spiritual forms, but he is not materially composed, nor has he any difference between body and self. That is the way of conceiving the spiritual form of the Lord. Text 37. When you were contemplating whether there was a source to the stem of the lotus of your birth, and you even entered into that stem, you could not trace out anything. But at that time, I manifested my form from within. Purport. The personality of Godhead can be experienced only by his causeless mercy, not by mental speculation or with the help of the material senses. Material senses cannot approach the transcendental understanding of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He can be appreciated only by submissive devotional service when he reveals himself before the devotee. Only by love of Godhead can one know God, and not otherwise. The personality of Godhead cannot be seen with the material eyes, but he can be seen from within by spiritual eyes, opened by the ointment of love of Godhead. As long as one's spiritual eyes are closed due to the dirty covering of matter, one cannot see the Lord. But when the dirt is removed by the process of devotional service, one can see the Lord without a doubt. Brahma's personal endeavor to see the root of the lotus pipe failed, but when the Lord was satisfied by his penance and devotion, he revealed himself from within with no external endeavor. Text 38. O Brahma, the prayers that you have chanted praising the glories of my transcendental activities, the penances you have undertaken to understand me, and your firm faith in me, all these are to be considered my causeless mercy. Purport. When a living entity desires to serve the Lord in transcendental loving service, the Lord helps the devotee in so many ways as the Chaitya Guru, or the spiritual master within, and thus the devotee can perform many wonderful activities beyond material estimation. By the mercy of the Lord, even a layman can compose for prayers of the highest spiritual perfection. Such spiritual perfection is not limited by material qualifications, but is developed by dint of one's sincere endeavor to render transcendental service. Voluntary endeavor is the only qualification for spiritual perfection. Material acquisitions of wealth or education are not considered. Very important point, isn't it? I mean, all of us who have gone out and done book distribution for any length of time and done it to the point where we liked it, rather than doing it out of, duty or whatever, have got a little glimpse of this. Sometimes, you trying to distribute a book and every single person, no, 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 and after a while you just start to get a little depressed, what's going to happen here? And then if you take actual shelter of Lord Nityananda and Lord Chaitanya, all of a sudden, people will start to take the books. It's like magic. And then you realize after a while, hey, this ain't me doing this. This is something else is going on here. I may get all my lines right. I may be thinking that I'm, the cat's pajamas or, the mouse's cheese or whatever, But it takes some reciprocation from within the heart of the other person for them to actually say yes. And I don't know about you, but I found that when my desire to give the book was stronger than the desire of the other person not to take the book, they took the book. And if the desire of the other person not to take the book was stronger than my desire to take the book, you wouldn't take the book. That has to do with Krishna in the heart. That's it. So that idea is here amplified to its maximum degree when one can actually see the Lord face to face, when one's desire is that strong. Text 39. I am very much pleased by your description of me in terms of my transcendental qualities, which appear mundane to the mundaners. I grant you all benedictions in your desire to glorify all the planets by your activities. Purport. What a benediction, huh? I grant you all benedictions in your desire to glorify all the planets by your activities. Purport. A pure devotee of a Lord like Brahma and those in his line of disciplic succession always desire that the Lord be known all over the universe by each and every one of the living entities. That desire of the devotee is always blessed by the Lord. The impersonalist sometimes prays for the mercy of the personality of Godhead, Narayana, as the embodiment of material goodness. But such prayers do not satisfy the Lord, because he is not thereby glorified in terms of his actual transcendental qualities. Let's read that again. This is pretty important. The impersonalist sometimes prays for the mercy of the personality of Godhead, Narayana, as the embodiment of material goodness. But such prayers do not satisfy the Lord because he is not thereby glorified in terms of his actual transcendental qualities. The pure devotees of the Lord are always most dear to him, although he is always kind and merciful to all living entities. Here the word gunamayam is significant because it indicates the Lord's possessing transcendental qualities. Text 40. Any human being who prays like Brahma and who thus worships me can very soon be blessed with the fulfillment of all his desires, for I am the Lord of all benediction. This is the reason why we recite prayers offered by the great souls, because it's a sure thing that Krishna's going to like them. Purport. The prayers offered by Brahma cannot be chanted by anyone who desires to fulfill his own sense gratification. Such prayers can be selected only by a person who wants to satisfy the Lord in his service. The Lord certainly fulfills all desires in regard to transcendental loving service, but he cannot fulfill the whims of non-devotees, even when such casual devotees offer him the best of prayers. So you may memorize 1,000,000 prayers, but if it's not actually for the pleasure of the senses of the Lord, he doesn't listen. At least not as much as when you are trying to please him. That's the difference between pure devotional service and mixed devotional service. Right? 41. It is the opinion of expert transcendentalists that the ultimate goal of performing all traditional good works, penances, sacrifices, charities, mystic activities, trances, and so on, is to invoke my satisfaction. We'll hear that again. It is the opinion of expert transcendentalists that the ultimate goal of performing all traditional good works, penances, sacrifices, charities, mystic activities, trances, etc., is to invoke my satisfaction. Purport. There are many traditionally pious activities in human society, such as altruism, philanthropy, nationalism, internationalism, charity, sacrifice, penance, and even meditation in trance, and all of them can be fully beneficial only when they lead to the satisfaction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The perfection of any activity, social, political, religious, or philanthropic, is to satisfy the Supreme Lord. This secret of success is known to the devotee of the Lord, as exemplified by Arjuna on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. As a good, non-violent man, Arjuna did not want to fight with his kinsman, but when he understood that Krishna wanted the fight and had arranged it at Kurukshetra, he gave up his own satisfaction and fought for the satisfaction of the Lord. That is the right decision for all intelligent men. One's only concern should be to satisfy the Lord by one's activities. If the Lord is satisfied by an action, whatever it may be, then it is successful. Otherwise, it is simply a waste of time. That is the standard of all sacrifice, penance, austerity, mystic trance, and other good and pious work. Text 42. I am the supersoul of every individual. I am the supreme director and the dearest. People are wrongly attached to the gross and subtle bodies, but they should be attached to me alone, only. Purport. The Supreme Lord, the Personality of Godhead, is the dearest in both the conditioned and liberated states. When a person does not know that the Lord is the only dearmost object, he is in the conditioned state of life. And when one knows perfectly well that the Lord is the only dearmost object, he is considered to be liberated. There are degrees of knowing one's relationship with the Lord, depending on the degree of realization as to why the Supreme Lord is the dearmost object of every living being. The real reason is clearly stated in Bhagavad Gita 15:7. Mamai vangsa jiva loke, jiva bhutak sanatanaha. The living entities are eternally parts and parcels of the Supreme Lord. The living entity is called the Atma, and the Lord is called the Paramatma. The living entity is called Brahman, and the Lord is called the Parabrahman, or the Parameshwara. Ishvara Paramak Krishna. The conditioned souls who do not have self-realization accept the body, the material body, as the dearmost. The idea of the dearmost is then spread all over the body. Oh, this is deep stuff. I need to hear this again. We need to hear this again. Right from the beginning of this purport. Right from the verse, actually. Try to hear this as deeply as possible. This is very deep. It's got a lot of ways to meditate on how you're not the body and why you should come to the point of always always realizing that you're not the body. How to do it is in these words. I am the super soul of every individual. I am the supreme director and the dearest. People are wrongly attached to the gross and subtle bodies, but they should be attached to me only. Purport. The Supreme Lord, the personality of Godhead, is the dearest in both the conditioned and liberated states. When a person does not know that the Lord is the only dearmost object, then he is in the conditioned state of life. And when one knows perfectly well that the Lord is the only dearmost object, he is considered to be liberated. There are degrees of knowing one's relationship with the Lord, depending on the degree of realization as to why the Supreme Lord is the dearmost object of every living being. The real reason is clearly stated in Bhagavad Gita 15.7. Mamaivang sho jiva loke jiva bhutak sanatanaha. The living entities are eternally parts and parcels of the Supreme Lord. The living entity is called the Atma, and the Lord is called the Paramatma. The living entity is called Brahman, and the Lord is called the Parabrahman. You can leave the door open now because it's quiet. Yeah, and we need air, isn't it? We need air. So you're just going to have to sit down. You got something to sit on right in your hand. There you go. Well done. Okay. I think for your benefit, I'm going to start this again because it's so nice. Just this verse and purport. We can't hear this enough times. If you can get into this verse and this purport and really understand it and go deep, you can make a lot of spiritual advancement. You ready for that? You want to make some spiritual advancement? You came to the right place at the right time. Haribol. Translation. This is the Lord himself speaking to Lord Brahma. Garbhodakshay Vishnu speaking to Lord Brahma. I am the super soul. It's 3:9:31.
It's 42.
Oh, I'm sorry. We started on 42. Thank you. I thought for a second that Swami Pras was here. But we've got a new fact checker. Thanks. Okay. And all of you out there in cyberspace, tune up your spiritual antennas because this verse and this purport is really deep and timely. 3:9:42. Garbhodakshay Vishnu speaking to Lord Brahma. I am the super soul of every individual. I am the supreme director and the dearest. People are wrongly attached to the gross and subtle bodies, but they should be attached to me only. Purport. The Supreme Lord, the personality of Godhead, is the dearest in both the conditioned and liberated states. When a person does not know that the Lord is the only dearmost object, then he is in the conditioned state of life. And when one knows perfectly well that the Lord is the only dearmost object, he is considered to be liberated. There are degrees of knowing one's relationship with the Lord, depending on the degree of realization as to how the Supreme Lord is the dearmost object of every living being. The real reason is clearly stated in Bhagavad Gita 15.7. Mamaivang so jiva loke jiva bhutak sanatanaha. The living entities are eternally parts and parcels of the Supreme Lord. The living entity is called the Atma, and the Lord is called the Paramatma. The living entity is called Brahman, and the Lord is called the Parabrahman, or the Parameshwara. Ishwara Parama Krishna. The conditioned souls, who do not have self-realization, accept the material body as the dearmost. The idea of the dearmost is then spread all over the body, both concentrated and extended. The attachment for one's own body and its extensions, like children and relatives, is actually developed on the basis of the real living entity. As soon as the real living entity is out of the body, even the body of the most dear son is no longer attractive. Therefore, the living spark, or eternal part of the Supreme, is the real basis of affection, and not the body. Because the living entities are also parts of the whole living entity, that Supreme living entity is the factual basis of affection for all. One who has forgotten the basic principle of his love for everything has only flickering love, because he is in Maya. The more one is affected by the principle of Maya, the more he is detached from the basic principle of love. One cannot factually love anything unless he is fully developed in the loving service of the Lord. In the present verse, stress is given to focusing love upon the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The word kuryat is significant here. This means one must have it. It is just to stress that we must have more and more attachment to the principle of love. The influence of Maya is experienced by the part and parcel spiritual entity, but it cannot influence the Supersoul, the Paramatma. The Mayavadi philosophers, accepting the influence of Maya on the living entity, want to become one with the Paramatma. But because they have no actual love for Paramatma, they remain ever entrapped by the influence of Maya and are unable to approach the vicinity of Paramatma. This inability is due to their lack of affection for the Paramatma. A rich miser does not know how to utilize his wealth, and therefore, in spite of his being very rich, his miserly behavior keeps him everlastingly a poor man. On the other hand, a person who knows how to utilize wealth can quickly become a rich man, even with a small credit balance. The eyes and the sun are very intimately related, because without sunlight the eyes are unable to see. But the other parts of the body, being attached to the sun as a source of warmth, take more advantage of the sun than do the eyes. Without possessing affection for the sun, the eyes cannot bear the rays of the sun. Or in other words, such eyes have no capacity to understand the utility of the sun's rays. Similarly, the empiric philosophers, despite their theoretical knowledge of Brahman, cannot utilize the mercy of the Supreme Brahman because they lack affection. So many impersonalist philosophers remain everlastingly under the influence of Maya because, although they indulge in theoretical knowledge of Brahman, they do not develop affection for Brahman, nor do they have any scope for development of affection because of their defective methods. A devotee of the sun god, even though devoid of a devotee of the sun god, even though devoid of eyesight, can see the sun god as he is, even from this planet, whereas one who is not a devotee of the sun cannot even bear the glaring sunlight. Similarly, by devotional service, even though one is not on the level of a jnani, one can see the personality of Godhead within himself due to his development of pure love. In all circumstances, one should try to develop love of Godhead, and that will solve all contending problems. What a purport, isn't it? We'll discuss that later when we get to the end of our session. Text 43. By following my instructions, you can now generate the living entities as before, by dint of your complete Vedic wisdom, and the body you have directly received from me, the supreme cause of everything. So that means this is not in the very, very beginning of the creation. This is at the end of one of the nights of Brahma. Because at the beginning of a night of Brahma, when he goes to sleep, a big part of the universe is dissolved and absorbed in water. And every time he gets up, what we have to do, brush your teeth, do your body maintenance, put on your tilak. He has to, every time he gets up, he has to recreate part of the universe. You sure you want to be Brahma? Okay, go ahead. Text 44. The sage Maitreya said, after instructing Brahma, the creator of the universe, to expand, the primeval Lord, the personality of Godhead, in his personal form as Narayana, disappeared. Purport. Before his activity in creating the universe, Brahma saw the Lord. That is the explanation of the Chatushloki Bhagavatam. When the creation awaited Brahma's activity, Brahma saw the Lord, and therefore the Lord existed in his personal form before the creation. His eternal form is not created by the attempt of Brahma, as imagined by less intelligent men. The personality of God had appeared as he is before Brahma, and he disappeared from him in the same form, which is not materially tinged. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports of the 3rd canto, 9th chapter of the Srimad-Bhagavatam, entitled Brahma's Prayer for Creative Energy. Haribol, Haribol, Jai Shri Krishna, Haribol, 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 Brahma ki jai, Lord Vishnu ki jai, Lord Premanandi, Hari Haribol. Well, I'm going to keep going for a while before we have our reflections, because it's my duty. Because it's a shorter time. Chapter 10. Divisions of the Creation. Text 1. Sri Vidura said, O great sage, please let me know how Brahma, the grandfather of the planetary inhabitants, created the bodies of the living entities from his own body and mind after the disappearance of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So we're about to hear exactly how it went down. That's why this is called Vijnana, not Jnana. This is not Jnana, this is Vijnana. Text 2. O greatly learned one, kindly eradicate all my doubts, and let me know of all that I have inquired from you, from the beginning to the end. If you remember right, Vidura asked so many questions that we can't even remember the questions. His questions are so deep, they gave more knowledge than all of us put together couldn't understand. But those are just the questions. And now he's going to get the answers to the most evolved of the questions. Purport. Vidura asked all relevant questions of Maitreya because he knew well that Maitreya was the right person to reply to all the points of his inquiries. One must be confident about the qualifications of his teacher. One should not approach a layman for replies to specific spiritual inquiries. Such inquiries, when replied to with imaginative answers by the teacher, are a program for wasting time. And we might want to add to that the question has to be proper also. You get answers to the degree of the appropriateness of your question. Translation. Sutta Goswami said, O son of Bhrigu, the great sage Maitreya Muni, thus hearing from Vidura, felt very much enlivened. Everything was in his heart, and thus he began to reply to the questions, one after another. Purport. The phrase Sutta Uvacha, Sutta Goswami said, appears to indicate a break in the discourse between Maharaj Parikshit and Shukadeva Goswami. While Shukadeva Goswami was speaking to Maharaj Parikshit, Sutta Goswami was only one member of a large audience. But Sutta Goswami was speaking to the sages of Naimisharanya, headed by the sage Shaunaka, a descendant of Shukadeva Goswami. This, however, does not make any substantial difference in the topics under discussion. In other words, you've got a layer upon layer upon layer of discussion going on here at the same time. But that shouldn't bewilder us, because that's the way of passing down transcendental knowledge. The person always repeats something that he has heard from someone who is more elevated than him, and he heard it from him, and therefore he understands it properly. That's the parampara system. Text 4. So when Lord Chaitanya said, all of you become guru, he wasn't just saying something casual. The greatly learned sage Maitreya said, O Vidura, Brahma thus engaged himself in penances for 100 celestial years, as advised by the personality of Godhead, and applied himself in devotional service to the Lord. So this is interesting. Brahma did austerities in order to see the Lord, got the instructions from the Lord, and then he does another 100 years of austerity to be able to apply the instructions of the Lord. So we shouldn't think, okay, now I got my saffron cloth, got my tilak, everything's okay, now got my bead bag, got my kontimala, I'm walking through the streets and people are going, oh, bowing down sometimes if you're in India. Of course, in America you may get a different response. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you got it. Purport. That Brahma engaged himself for the personality of Godhead Narayana means that he engaged himself in the service of the Lord. That is the highest penance one can perform for any number of years. There is no retirement from such service, which is eternal and ever encouraging. Text 5. Thereafter Brahma saw that both the lotus on which he was situated and the water on which the lotus was growing were trembling due to a strong, violent wind. Do you think there's Hurricane Harvey was something? This is something else. Purport. The material world is called illusory because it is a place of forgetfulness of the transcendental service of the Lord. Thus, one engaged in the Lord's devotional service in the material world may sometimes be very much disturbed by awkward circumstances. Sound familiar? Anybody here get sometimes disturbed by awkward circumstances? There is a declaration of war between the two parties, the illusory energy and the devotee. And sometimes the weak devotees fall victim to the onslaught of the powerful illusory energy. And the materialists think that they're going to be able to build dams and levees and, water breakers and all these things to stop the flow of water, and all of a sudden the tsunami comes and just wipes all of that out in just 10 minutes. Years and years and decades building it up, and the tsunami will come and poof, gone. And yet they're thinking that they can conquer nature. Jeez, how stupid is that? Lord Brahma, however, was sufficiently strong by the causeless mercy of the Lord, and he could not be victimized by the material energy, although it gave him cause for anxiety when it managed to totter the existence of his position. So why was it that he could not be victimized by the material energy? Yes, because Krishna told him that he wouldn't be, because he got Krishna's mercy. Text 6. Rupa Goswami therefore said, we're not trying to see the Lord. We're trying to get the mercy of the Lord. We're not trying to get the Lord. We're trying to get the mercy of the Lord. Because if you get the mercy of the Lord, you automatically get the Lord. But if you're trying to get the Lord, you don't necessarily get the mercy of the Lord, and therefore you don't get the Lord. Text 6. Long penance and transcendental knowledge of self-realization had matured Brahma in practical knowledge. And thus he drank the wind completely along with the water. Well, there's a solution. Purport. Lord Brahma's struggle for existence is a personal example of the continued fight between living entities in the material world and the illusory energy called Maya. Beginning from Brahma down to this age, the living entities are struggling with the forces of material nature. By advanced knowledge in science and transcendental realization, one can try to control the material energy, which works against our endeavors. And in the modern age, advanced material scientific knowledge and penance have played very wonderful roles in controlling the powers of the material energy. Such control of the material energy, however, can be most successfully carried out if one is a soul surrendered under the Supreme Personality of Godhead and carries out His order in the spirit of loving transcendental service. Text 7. Thereafter, he saw that the lotus on which he was situated was spread throughout the universe. And he contemplated how to create all the planets which were previously merged in that very same lotus. So, when it sometimes says that the planets are in the stem of the... Sometimes devotees think that they stay there, that that's where they are, and they're just contained in a little stem of a... But it's not like that. They were there, and then they came out and became the lotus flower. And then Brahma saw, and then he positioned everything in the right place. All the ingredients were there in the lotus flower, which came from his body, actually, or he came from that lotus also. That's rather just opposite. Imagine the mystic power that Krishna gave him. And he's a jiva. Purport. The seeds of all the planets in the universe were impregnated in the lotus on which Brahma was situated. All the planets were already generated by the Lord, and all the living entities were also born in Brahma. The material world and the living entities were all already generated in seedling forms by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And Brahma was to disseminate the same seedlings all over the universe. The real creation is therefore called Sarga, and later on, the manifestation by Brahma is called Visarga. Text 8. Thus engaged in the service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Brahma entered into the whorl of the lotus, and as it spread all over the universe, he divided it into 3 divisions of worlds, and later into 14 divisions. Text 9. Lord Brahma is the most exalted personality in the universe because of his causeless devotional service unto the Lord in mature transcendental knowledge. He therefore created all the 14 planetary divisions for inhabitation by the different types of living entities. Purport. The Supreme Lord is the reservoir of all the qualities of the living entities. The conditioned souls in the material world reflect only part of those qualities, and therefore they are sometimes called pratibimbas. These pratibimba living entities, as parts and parcels of the Supreme Lord, have inherited different portions of his original qualities. And in terms of their inheritance of these qualities, they appear as different species of life and are accommodated in different planets according to the plan of Brahma. Brahma is the creator of the three worlds, namely the lower planets called the Patalokas, the middle planets called the Burlokas, and the upper planets called the Swarlokas. Still higher planets, such as Maharloka, Tapaloka, and Satyaloka, and Brahmaloka, do not dissolve in the devastating water. This is because of the causeless devotional service rendered by the Lord by their inhabitants, whose existence continues up to the end of the Dviparardra time, when they are generally liberated from the chain of birth and death in the material world. Text 10. Vidura inquired from Maitreya, O my Lord, O greatly learned sage, kindly describe eternal time, which is another form of the Supreme Lord, the wonderful actor. What are the symptoms of that eternal time? Please describe them to us in detail. So I'm going to stop here. We'll start with that verse tomorrow night. So we will now have some reflections. I mean, if that wasn't enough food for thought, for reflections, I don't know what was. Gopal Champu wants to reflect. Here you go.
Hare Krishna. Thank you for allowing us to come into your space, Maharaj, while you perform this austerity, this yajna, to put out Srila Prabhupada's books for everyone to hear. I was appreciating this point, Lord Brahma, after receiving the instruction and meditating for so many years, and it just made me think of Srila Prabhupada, a lifetime in preparation, even though he received the instructions from his spiritual master from the first time he met him. He made the point that he was always thinking how to execute the order, and then until he was 70 years old, he came out and did everything he did.
Very nice. Very nice. Thank you so much. And that's what we were talking about before, during the reading, that we shouldn't think just because we got the order that it's done. It takes a lot of preparation to get the goal, the final conclusion. Yeah, wonderful. Thank you very much. And every one of us is in that situation. None of us should be impatient. And that's what we're hearing about is the enthusiasm, the patience, determination, all those things that are required to be, successful in spiritual life. And that has to be kept going, right up to the last breath. Okay. Yes. Nambisuno. Take it away.
Hare Krishna.
Well, leave it before you leave. Leave the microphone.
Don't take it away.
You need it for
Hare Krishna. I was just appreciating that point. Brahma, Lord Vishnu was explaining to Brahma that the penance that you performed, I forget, there's a list of 3 things, but your faith in me, and another thing, which sound like they came from Brahma. He said, "Please know that these are all my causeless mercy." And I thought that was really amazing, that even the things that might be seen as Brahma himself doing, it's just the mercy of Krishna.
Yeah, and also the result of that, if I remember right, is that he would be able to see that everything was Krishna, and that everything is permeated by Krishna and Krishna's consciousness. We have somebody from out there in cyberspace. Go ahead.
The first realization is from Hannah.
Hey, Hannah. Welcome back.
She says, by hearing Lord Krishna speak to his pure devotees, I can understand what people mean when they say, no matter how much we want Krishna, he wants us more. So much so that he performs these leelas. bewilders his pure devotees, all for our benefit. This shows me very obviously there is no real love within this cosmic manifestation, and how merciful our Lord is, and how that mercy flows from his heart through the hearts of every devotee in the parampara disciplic succession.
Gentlemen, that was an 18-year-old right out of high school speaking. And speaking as a result of her hearing for how long? Maybe, I was just, thank you very much, Hannah. That was fantastic. And I was just, relating to the room full of brahmacharis I got here, that you're, 18-year-old and right out of high school and in a woman's body, and yet you just nailed it. And the reason you did is because you're hearing, and you've been hearing for quite some months, every day the Srimad-Bhagavatam submissively. Thank you very much for that. It was not only was it nice and the realization was nice, but it sent a message out to everybody. I remember my birthday and you spoke spontaneously, and maybe you thought you got a little bit too, I don't know, spontaneous and whatever. You didn't just read something, you just spoke spontaneously. But there were a couple of brahmacharis with Bhakti Prakash Maharaj, who happened to just walk in the door during it was like a cameo visit. He just kind of walked in the door and everybody went, what? Even me, I went, what? He came and sat down and he said something, I said something. He had two brahmacharis with him. I think they were from New York. Yeah. And she started to speak. Hannah, don't worry, I'm not trying to embarrass you, I'm just trying to make a point. And I looked at one of the brahmacharis and I raised my eyebrow and I went like this, and she said, oh, and then he came over to me and said, Maharaj, you got to come to New York because we need this. How is she speaking like that? This is, and went on and on like that. And I just said, well, maybe you better read the books. Because it's all there in the books, right? And he said, yeah, that's right. There you go. Thanks, Hannah.
We have a question and reflection from Gopi Chandra Devidasi. She says, Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj, thank you for this wonderful reading session. I would like to inquire about this part you just read. There is a declaration of war between the two parties, the illusory energy and the devotee, and sometimes the weak devotees fall victim to the onslaught of the powerful illusory energy. Lord Brahma, however, was sufficiently strong by the causeless mercy of the Lord. Krishna also promises in that Bhagavad Gita that he protects his devotees. Although Srila Prabhupada also said that we're not afraid enough of Maya, we ourselves are always weaker than the material energy, which is much more powerful than us. What does it mean in practice that we should have a healthy fear of Maya and at the same time know we're protected? Thank you in advance.
Wonderful question. Thank you so much. Well, the answer to the question was given in the beginning of the chapter in which Lord, and it was already mentioned actually in the question session we've had in the reflections, and that is that the living entity can only get the power to resist the material energy by the mercy of the Lord. But as the universe unfolds more and more, or a day of Brahma unfolds more and more, Krishna appears once in a day of Brahma, right? So that means once in a day of Brahma, he has to get a refresher course. He has to go to adult school, I guess you could say, because even Brahma, as powerful as he is, he's still, subject to the illusory energy. Even though he's in control of it and he's much, much more capable than anyone else, still Krishna sometimes appears in such a way and shows him that he's actually subordinate to him. So the seed of the answer to your question is that we actually have to accept, first of all, that we are inferior to the material energy. That's the seed. So we're at war with it, but we have to know that we're inferior to it and we can't actually conquer it unless we have the mercy of the Lord. It's only the mercy of the Lord that allows us to be able to stay aloof from it. And even in that condition, sometimes we have to see it for what it is, to see how it's more powerful in us, and be humbled. Because in the Bhagavatamrita, Sanatana Goswami explains that in order to actually be qualified for love for Krishna, for pure love for Krishna, you have to become utterly humble. This is what Lord Chaitanya also teaches. The humility, Trinadupi Sunichina, Chiroti Sahishtana, Amanina Manadena, Kirtaniyak Sadahari. So that's called Dainya. The perfection of that, or the extreme of that humility, is called Dainya, in which one thinks that everyone else is a better devotee than him, or everybody else is a devotee except for him or her. That's the seed of it. And in order to get there, we have to be repeatedly, as long as we're in the conditioned state, we have to repeatedly get, reminded. And that's what the onslaught is about. And that's why sometimes when we're weak and the onslaught comes, we succumb and then we suffer like anything. And then by the mercy of a devotee, or by the mercy of our spiritual master, by the mercy of our own penance and practice, we kind of see it a little more, and then we see it a little bit more. Therefore, it said in the one purport, if you remember, it said there are degrees of this understanding. And what I took from that, excuse me, I'm doing my own reflection and answering your question, Gopi Chandra, hope you don't mind. But what I remember, what I got from that was that, that degree is dependent on the degree that you understand just how powerful Krishna is. In other words, if you want to love someone, really love someone, to the degree you can love someone is the degree that you know them. You can't really love someone unless you really know them. And therefore the whole first 9 cantos of the Bhagavatam is meant to give us more and more knowledge about Krishna and his energies, and who he actually is, before we get to the 10th canto and hear his human-like pastimes. So we won't make the mistake of thinking that he's just a human. And that may seem obvious to us at this point, but actually it's not. And that's why Lord Brahma, as powerful as he is, sometimes has to get reminded, when he comes and steals Krishna's cowherd boys and calves, puts them in a cave, and then goes away for a couple of minutes, and that's a whole year, or some moment, and as the whole year goes by, and Krishna expands all those calves and cowherd boys, and maintains them, with all detail, so that even the mothers and fathers and cows can't tell the difference in terms of physically, can't tell the difference in the form and everything, but it's actually Krishna, and their love comes out for their forms of their children more than they can imagine. And finally Lord Brahma, Balaram, who happened to be not there because it was his birthday, right, and his mother kept him back from going out that day. So after a year, Balaram says, "What's going on here? I'm seeing all these cows and calves and the way they're acting toward the mothers and vice versa. Something's going on here. And if I can't understand it, it can't be Maya, because Maya can't fool me. It must be Krishna." Then he asked Krishna directly. He says, "Oh yeah, this is what happened." And then by Krishna's arrangement, it was a year to the day, and it was Balaram's birthday again, and he didn't go out again. And then this whole thing happened to Brahma, and he had to see all the cowherd boys and calves turn into Vishnu forms, and see all the universes in each one of them. And finally, he just shut down. His senses shut down. He couldn't accommodate it. He couldn't wrap his mind around what he was seeing. And before he actually passed out, lost consciousness, Krishna then changed, lifted the veil of Maya from him, And then he could see what was going on again. And then he made his prayers. So, this is what it means. It means that none of us should become puffed up, no matter how deep a devotee we become, because we're jivas, and we're tiny, and any one of us can fall at any second, and therefore we need to take full shelter of Krishna. So that's the essence of the answer to the question. Hare Krishna. And the moral of the story is don't give up under any condition. And eventually, just like Krishna gave Brahma that benediction, you won't become bewildered by the material energy. And therefore Brahma could only be bewildered when Krishna bewilders him directly. So if even Lord Brahma has to get that experience in order for him to remember that, he's not, the cat's pajamas, as we say in America. You may not be able to understand that analogy, Gopi Chandra, but us Americans can understand it. Anyway, it means that we're thinking we're something special, like really special, like the most special. You don't see cat in a pajamas very often. The cat's got his pajamas on, and he's thinking, hey, I'm the top cat, So if you're very intelligent and you think you're intelligent and you can see more than maybe others, and you may, kind of cop an attitude towards others and say things and do things that, then, Maya will teach us lessons until we can actually become humble and give respect to everyone. Amanina, manidena, part of dainya, it's part of utter humility. And that's what you need in order to get real, pure love for Krishna. Hare Krishna. So, I think I'm going to stop there. It's almost 8 o'clock. It's not a 5-hour session, but it's something. It ain't nothing. Thank you so much. Especially to thank Gopi Chandra for that wonderful question, and Hannah for that wonderful question. That means you're hearing very deeply, and look forward for more of the same. And for all of you here in the room today, thank you so much for your reflections and your ears, for making it easier to speak, because the ability to speak and the ability to hear, there's a relationship between the tongue and the ear. Thanks a lot. Srimad-Bhagavatam ki jai. Samaveda Bhakta Brinda ki jai. Gaur Premanandi. Lord Brahma ki jai. Garbhodakashai Vishnu ki jai. See you tomorrow night.